Oh, they all left? All right, so 10 people. Oh, they never went, then we won't. Okay.
Were they in the
They're not there
kitchen?
now.
They were in the kitchen before.
Okay, I thought they were here,
Is that
so
through?
Frank, did you recess or did you adjourn?
we adjourned. And it was a motion by Ms. Hoskins, seconded by and unanimous.
So you're not going back into
They're not. Yeah, make this make up.
Thank you.
Yeah, so then fine.
Oh, Mary's dead.
We'll keep it in.
It's not. I told him.
So I'm going to call the meeting to order. Today is September 12th, 2017. This is a business meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. I want to apologize for you folks for running late. We had a number of things on our executive session that took more time than we'd expected. So first, if I could have everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Glasgow?
Here.
Ms. Hoskins? Here. Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. McGovern?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Mrs. Shaw?
Here.
And Mr. DeRosa?
Here.
Thanks.
And if you could call the calendar, please.
Tuesday, September 26th, there will be a school committee business meeting, and Tuesday, October 10th, there will be a school committee business meeting.
Thank you. So we have two presentations on our agenda today. First, I'll defer to Mrs. King for the Meritorious Budget Award.
So I just want to inform the school committee and the public that for the third year in a row, we have been awarded the ASBO International Meritorious Budget Award for this year. It's for a 17-18 budget. That organization is an international group. And their Meritorious Budget Award is, their rules are very stringent on what needs to be included in that award. It's actually a very prestigious award. It shows that we promote excellence in our presentation and development of our school budget. The document consists of an executive summary, an organizational section, a financial section, an informational section. And it has a wealth of information, historical information regarding, grades and financials and just about everything regarding the school department. We have that posted on our business office website. It's 465 pages, but I would encourage you to take a look at it. You'll see a lot of photos of our students. There's a lot of information regarding awards that our students have received. And this award that we received is really due to the work of our controller, Steve Janelle. It's very important to him that our budget and our financials are presented timely and transparently, and he's done a really, really good job with this. This was really him putting all that together. The checklist that ASBO requires is, just the checklist alone is 10 pages long. And we're very proud. We think this really shows how important it is to the school department and the school committee, because you hire us and allow us to do this great work, how important it is that we have the historical information regarding our school department. So I think we should really thank Steve Janelle for that. I thank him very much for his hard work and dedication to our financials and the presentation of them.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. Before we get to our park presentation, I wanted to pull one item on our agenda up a little bit, which was school committee action regarding, make sure I get this right, NBA NK grievance number 2, which was the second one you heard this evening, so that we can discuss that a little bit before we get to everything else. Any objections to pulling that forward? So, did you want to? You had a comment. You don't- no, okay. So, with respect to our discussion, and this not being a strictly personnel grievance like most, we can talk a little more about it than we normally could. This was a grievance with respect to the heat that arises on the high school upper floors during the summertime, and the union had requested that the school committee take some action to alleviate the difficulties that they've had with that. And it's something that we've been discussing many times over the year, and we appreciate the union bringing it to our attention again. So what we'd like to do is I'm going to make a motion that the superintendent and administration come back to us within 60 days with some basic cost estimates on some of the things that were brought up by the teacher side, and also just general framing of what the actual, we can't have actual costs, but estimated preliminary costs for remedying the heat situation, whether it be by a full air conditioning system, which we believe will be very expensive, or maybe even some more remedial actions that might be more within the realm of current budgetary possibilities. If you could get that back to us within 60 days, we would appreciate that. If I could have a second to that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
And then formally, I think we need to make a separate motion. Our attorney told me I'm wrong. To basically, with the respect to actually acting on the grievance itself, we will, how would we phrase it?
You're going to hold a resolution to the grievance right now.
Okay, well, so we will, do we have to formally vote on that, or?
I would.
Okay, so we're going to hold off making a formal resolution to the grievance at this point until we have more information back. So I'll make a motion that we hold off on making formal action on the grievance until we have some more information pursuant to that prior motion.
Second.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So going back to the order, next item on our agenda is a park presentation. Dr. Humbert?
Thank you very much. So this is probably one of the most pleasant presentations that I have been able to deliver to you. So I'm very happy because our results were very good. And so it's a pleasure to present this information to you tonight. So the park assessments were the ones that were administered last spring. So they are the 2017. This is the third time that these this type of assessment was administered. So it's our third year. So we do have 3 points of data in most cases. Oops. So for the state summary, overall, there were no changes in the scores for ELA or math from last year. There was a positive trend across all grade levels for ELA and math in the state, but the scores were flat. So there were not major increases, there were not major decreases. And in general, the widest achievement gap across the state was for ELA. And we also found that for North Kingstown as well. So we realized tremendous gain. This is not statistically significant gain as far as that is concerned. However, we are close to 10% ELA gain in ELA proficiency and 4.5% in math proficiency. And as we go along, you'll see that that is basically attributed to the huge gains that we had in Lay High School this year for ELA and math. So we had a few distinctions, and in fact, we're very, very proud, especially of the first one. Out of all the K through 12 public school districts in the state of Rhode Island, North Kingstown was the second highest performing in ELA. So it's amazing, and we're very, very proud of it. And then we were the sixth highest in the state for math. So in the past we've averaged around 5 or 6 generally. Now always hoping that we at least maintain that, and always of course hope to increase. But we really did it with the ELA this year. And then we had a few other distinctions. Wickford Middle School was the second highest performing school in the state for middle schools in both ELA and math. So there was only one other middle school in the state that performed higher, slightly higher than Wickford. So that is a very, very great distinction. And then from 2015, so that was the first year we administered, to 2017, so that's a 3-year trend, Wickford Middle School realized, and this is a statistically significant data point, 10% gain in ELA and an 11% gain in math. So when you look at the report that Brian has on his website, sometimes you'll see green, especially if it's statistically significant increase, you'll see it in green. If it's a statistically significant decrease, you'll see it in red. And so you'll see green in both ELA and then again in math for Wickford Middle School. And then Hamilton was the 4th highest performing elementary school. If you look at public schools, this is not considering charter schools. And they were just past Melrose, actually, in Jamestown.
Interesting. I thought Melrose was first in both ELA and math.
They might be, but I mean, they were, we were after them, I know that much.
After them?
Yes, yeah, Hamilton followed Melrose.
Followed Melrose,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, okay.
And then, just a few other points. So the high school, this is where we saw this huge gain. We had ELA proficiency of 37.6%. Now, it's important to realize that the year before, we tested in 9th grade and 10th grade. And in math, when we tested the year before, students had to take, let me say the reverse. This year, they only had to take a math if they hadn't taken a PARCC math in high school. It's really not apples to apples, just so everybody's clear about that, from last year to this year. I don't think it discounts the gain too much. It's a great gain, and Dr. Morse is here, and we have talked about this, because especially in the math, as you'll see coming up, our geometry really, really skyrocketed, and the jump, according to Dr. Morse, is basically a motivation. The students, if they did not demonstrate proficiency, were not allowed to take honors courses the following year. Is that a good way of putting it, Dr. Morse? So that was a motivating factor, and they performed well. Everybody following that so far? And now the district level and state results. You can see the state was at 40% proficiency for ELA, and we were at 63.4. And then for math, 33% versus 51.8, so almost 52%. And here's where we have the 3 years of data. Once again, I would have to say that if you look at the all and the high school, it's really not again comparing apples to apples. The elementary for sure and middle school for sure, but because of the change in the way the students were tested, who was eligible and required, that would affect the all and the high. Right? But I think it's good to look at the 3 years of data to see where we are, because it's always nice to make sure that we don't have real jumps in either direction. So it's helpful for that in that respect. And in math, you can see that we're pretty consistent too, hovering around the same numbers, except of course, the high school. These are our participation rates. Within the first year of the test, there was a lot of controversy about people wanting or not wanting to take the PARCC assessment, and a little bit of concern about the Common Core and the fact that PARCC was measuring the Common Core. So it was a rather political hot potato. And so we did not have the participation rates that we were hoping for outside of the elementary level. However, the following year, we were able to increase that in the middle level in particular, again in the elementary as far as that was concerned, and the high school went up quite a bit. Didn't hit the 95%, which was a requirement for the state, actually it's a federal requirement. However, came closer to that this past year, 97% participation in ELA and 94 in math. And then we had the others were close to 100%. So just a reminder that there are 5 levels, so when I'm talking about this proficiency, I'm talking about levels 4 and 5. This was different from our other measurements in NECAP, and it will be different moving forward with our next state assessment, which will be changing, and I'll get to that in a minute. So I did a comparison here, just a graph, so you can see visually what was happening in each grade level. So this is, now this is the grade 4 students, grade 4 last year, how they performed, and this year's grade 4. So these are not the same kids. When you see grade 4 for 2016 and grade 4 for 2017, that's not the same cohort. That's grade 4, how they performed last year, and grade 4, how they performed this year. So we're pretty consistent. We have, once again, high numbers in grade 7 for ELA. That has been very helpful and not surprising. We did see a little dip in the grade 6 performance, but once again, these are not the same group of students. And a little bit of dip in grade 8.
What happened there in grade 9? That's such a huge, is that?
That's the difference.
Yeah, that's what I was
I mean,
talking
is that
about.
cohort that different?
Yes.
Like, and you guys know that? Like, yeah, wow. It's amazing.
Right, and like I said, I think I think Dr. Moss hit it on the head with the motivation, because many of those, in her analysis the year before, she found that there were students who were in honors courses who did not demonstrate proficiency on the POC test, which, basically shows a lack of effort or seriousness in taking the test, fair to say. So to address that, it was a good suggestion that if you want to demonstrate that you are proficient in something, and you want to be able to do an honors course, then you need to demonstrate that proficiency. So it's not a punishment, but it's what a requirement is.
And I will just say anecdotally, because I have 2 9th graders who were in geometry, and all their friends, they all were panicking about that. They did discuss it, like, I need to pass this test or I can't take honors next year. So they heard the message. And when I say panic, I mean in a good way.
In 9th grade, right.
They were motivated. They weren't, so, just anecdotally. So.
That's good to hear. And then, I guess I can point out there, I don't need to really, that you can see what happened with the geometry.
Right.
Yeah. So that helped us overall. We had a little decrease in...
Yeah, there's the geometry. Yeah, but is that, well...
They knocked it out of the park.
so to speak. We did have a little bit of a dip.
Two of those kids were mine, baby. Sorry, just kidding.
We did have a little bit of dip in 8th grade, and overall in the state there was a little bit of dip in 8th grade. Not as much as that, only about 3 points.
Yeah, but Dr. Holmberg, it raises an important point, though, that I think that the state doesn't do a good job in explaining this to the public. That grade 8 could be grade 8 math or algebra 1, right?
So this grade 8 that's reflected here is only grade 8, not algebra 1 included.
Right, and so it kind of makes the point that if you're on the algebra 1 track, right, which is the grade level expectation, then there's say 60% is great, but there's a fair level of proficiency. Mm-hmm. If you are not on track, right, then that's where the gap is growing. And I think the state does a disservice saying, here's the math proficiency score. Because it's not really the math proficiency score. There's not a standard test that 8th graders take, right, that measures math. You're either algebra 1, geometry, right, geometry in 9th grade, right, or if you're in 8th grade and haven't taken algebra 1 level stuff, right, you take that math. Am I correct?
Right, but that is grade level. That is grade level expectation for a grade 8.
But they should
Yeah,
recreate
now.
it. Really, there
But in
should be
theory,
everything that
there's an
says-
expectation. We have a bunch of eighth graders taking the Algebra 1 test, right?
That we do.
Right.
And they
So,
are,
so,
they are on
so I
board.
think that's one of the points, which is, you know, what's our expectation? We have students who are Algebra 1 capable in eighth grade showing a fair amount of proficiency, and we have a bunch of students who aren't at Algebra 1 yet showing not a great proficiency, and that's just not, like you said, North Kingstown, that's across the whole state. And the state does a huge disservice because it just says a math score. And it hides the fact that students who are progressing, especially in North Kingstown, are doing well. But students who aren't progressing in earlier grades and aren't up to Algebra 1 standards aren't doing as well. And I think that's a fair statement across the state. I really wish the state would publish more data like this instead of just saying the math proficiency scores X at the middle school level.
Well, and I
It
think
really
it's-
hides this point.
And I think it's gonna be even more confusing next year, because next year we are testing only grade 8 math. So we're testing grades 3 through 8, and it's only math, and it's not separating out Algebra 1.
Right, so my guess is it's gonna show a higher proficiency level, and the
Yes, it
state's
is.
gonna go, look at how great we are doing once again in grade 8 math, and it's hiding an important point, which is if you're behind by middle school, you're behind, and you don't catch up on average. Okay.
This next one, I usually do this graph because I think it's important to see what you're looking at is level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and level 5 proficiency levels, so that you can see what you want to see is this top one being big, along with this one. So this is level 5, and this is level 4. So these two together, that's what you're looking to see the biggest. And so you can see here in grade 7, especially this is for ELA, as I already indicated, their performance was strong. You can see how, not only the proficiency, but you can see how many were at level 5, which is almost 40% reaching the top level. So that is very impressive. Grade 3, you can see the difference there. We still had 48 plus 8, I believe that is, so 56% proficiency, but not as much here in the top level. So that's really where you want to move people. And you also want to move people students from this level, 2 and 3, up into the proficiency range. So even moving into 4. Okay, so Mr. Jones, you are not going to like this graph at all. So there's the little green right there, and that is a 0 for our grade 8 math. And here at grade 3, you can see we have a much better proficiency.
Right, but my point again would be those students
If you dropped algebra in there.
are going to be the students who, in the past, would by 8th grade be taking Algebra 1 and also showing green or yellow. That's what gets lost. Is probably the students who are down in that red in the bottom are the ones end up, right, more likely to be taking just that grade 8 math. And I think it just reinforces the point the state, I won't say hides, but doesn't really make us transparent, which is it's really important to be on track early in math.
Right? Anyone want to add anything to that?
No, I totally agree with that. The same dynamic happens at the high school with the Algebra 1, because our Algebra 1 students are the students who are coming in behind. If they're taking Algebra 1 in 9th grade, they're slightly behind most of their peers.
So you will love that slide when it comes up. Well, which is right now. I do have a typo on here that I've corrected in red, but it is not corrected on the submitted PowerPoint. I thought this was a little bit high and didn't catch it until I was going through the slides again. So that was just a typo. So for everybody who wants a little more clarification about this algebra versus grade 8 math, general math. And generally, students who are stronger in math take Algebra 1 in middle school. Therefore, student data on Algebra 1 is much stronger among the middle school students than their regular grade 8 math and the high school Algebra 1 students. Because the students that are taking it at the high school, as Dr. Moss just said, are those students who were our struggling students in 8th grade general math, because they didn't take Algebra 1, so you assume they were not the most advanced, or they weren't the strongest in math in grade 8. So when it comes time to get to the high school and they have to take Algebra 1, math is not one of their strengths at that particular point. So if you look at the data here, you'll see that our middle school middle school algebra, we were close to 87, close to 90%. We did fall back in 77%. The state also fell back with 8th grade Algebra 1, and a point has been made that we had more participation this year. And maybe that attributes to it. Maybe there were students who were taking Algebra 1 who maybe that wasn't the best placement for them. I don't know if you can argue that or not. The high school also had more students and more participants, and they actually increased. So this shows the differences, the gaps in our subgroup population. So this is another area that's a favorite of Mr. Jones, and that is the gender. So we see here that females in ELA seem to do a whole lot better than male counterparts. And so last year, not last year, the year before, the boys were at 47% proficiency and the girls were at 60%. This year, the boys went up to 55%, but the girls shot up to 72%.
Right, which, and I guess an important point that the state also doesn't make is this result is not North Kingstown. This result is the state. This result is Barrington. This result is the poorest districts in Providence. This result is charter schools. This result cuts across just about every demographic you can think of. In fact, I think we only have one school where the males did slightly better in 1 or 2 grades. And so it raises 2 points. One is that if your test-taking population is skewed females, your ELA results are going to look higher, right? And the state doesn't norm for that. You can look at one school which touts really great results. They have 62% of the test takers were females, right? So it's going to skew your ELA results. The second point is that, Phil, you know this because is you just don't hear it from the state when they talk about all the other things going wrong, that male ELA proficiency is a statewide problem. And I really wish the commissioner and the governor would think about that occasionally.
And so, thank you, Mr. Jones. We also have disparities with our LEP is considered our English language learner. So this is limited English proficiency. Both terms apply to the same subgroup. And you can see last year the proficiency rate was much higher for our Ls. This year we're down to 10% proficiency. And as I told you in the beginning of the presentation, they're finding that was statewide too. So it's hard to explain. It may be content. We don't see it the same in math. And generally, and I'm going to give you a sheet in a minute so you can see this. It's easier to be able to comprehend. Generally, it's our special ed population, the IEP, that shows the greater gaps, and this year it is not the case. There's still gaps, but not as much. And then in math, you see here how the math, there's still, I guess there is still quite a bit of a gap right there too. So this was not counted as far as our accountability for state performance. Next year it will be. The PSAT and the SAT will be the state assessment at the high school level. There will not be another test. This will be it. So I decided to put this in so that you could see it. So what you're looking at is the PSAT, which grade 10 took, and we have evidence-based writing, reading and writing is the first score, and math. This is a total score of the two, which is basically an average within about 1%. And so you see where we're standing at 80% proficiency, well, meeting benchmark, which I guess you could call proficiency. And the benchmark, I do have that written down. I have the numbers if you want to know what those are. And then the SAT is grade 11, and you can see pretty similar, 80%, 55, and 54 for a total.
How can the average, that combined score, be less than the average of the individual
Yeah, no,
scores?
just as I was
it's
saying
not
it,
an
I was
average.
wondering too.
It's proficiency in both.
Right, so does that say that students are generally stronger in one than the other?
Well, the numbers
Well,
show that
like
too.
you can't be any higher than your lowest one because it's students who've got the minimum threshold in both subjects.
So you could get a perfect score
In
on
math.
a verbal SAT and get a non-proficient score in math, and you wouldn't end up on the number because you weren't proficient in both.
Right, but I think generally when we sit here and see these results, it seems like we basically have good students who are good in both and students who struggle, which is a smaller percentage. So that seems like a very low number to me.
Yeah.
What were the benchmarks? Like, the benchmarks were the SAT?
They correspond to an SAT score, right?
Right.
Right, yeah, and I do
Oh.
have that information. So the benchmark for the SAT is very similar for both. The benchmark for the SAT is 480 for the evidence-based reading and writing, and for the math it's 530. So the span, and then the span for the total together is 400 to as the lowest point to 1600 as the highest. And then for the PSAT, the benchmark is 430 as opposed to 480, so just 50 less, and 480 as opposed to 530. And that span is 320 to 1520, 1,520 instead of 1,600.
Is there any insight on why the scores seem to be staying the same, if not decreasing, from the PSAT to the SAT? Because, right, the PSAT is really meant to get people ready for the SAT, but it doesn't really seem like people are improving between the two tests.
Right. This was the first time we did it in a school day. And so
you have a wider population of students taking the exam than when we do.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction, which is now that the state
everyone did take it because the
Now
state
everyone's
paid for it
right.
now.
Right.
used to be self-selection, which had probably an upward bias. Scores.
So I have learned my lesson with Mr. Jones, and I have analyzed every which way. So this is what you're seeing right now.
I'm sure you can come up with a way or two you didn't think.
Exactly.
Wait a minute.
Maybe not right this second, but tomorrow morning.
These were submitted in the documents you had, but they were horizontal, so you might have had trouble reading them. So the first one, so let me just finish up with this. So this is the same thing that we've been doing year upon year regarding the assessments. It's the beginning of our work when we get these results. It's what causes us to reflect on how we're instructing, what our scope and sequences are, what other formative and summative assessments we're doing in the classroom. And then we look at these things called evidence tables to see how we're doing with each standard. And by the way, the individual student reports are heading home for this Friday. So those of you who have students in the schools that took the test, you will be receiving those. Before I just go over this disaggregated data, I do want you to know now that we have nailed 3 years of PARCC, we are no longer going to have the park. And so we have the RICAS. You've probably heard of the MCAS, and so it's the same test. It's the Rhode Island Comprehensive Assessment System, and it will be in grades 3 through 8 in ELA and math. And then, as I mentioned, there will be the SAT and the PSAT, and those will be done during the school day. Dr. Moore schedules all of that at the high school, which will be easier than doing the full block park testing that she has had to do. It's been an absolute bear to schedule these assessments, and she's done an outstanding job with it. And then there are the 2 other assessments that you should be familiar with too. There is a new alternate assessment for students who do not take the RICAS, and it is called the Dynamic Learning Map. I believe it's a little more interactive. It has a math and an ELA component, which will be done in grades 3 to 8 and then grade 11. And it has science at grades 5, 8, and 11. That matches the new science test that's coming out, which is aligned to the next generation science standards, the NGSS. And that is done in grades 5, 8, and 11. That is a change. It used to be done in grade 4, 8, and 11, but grade 4 was tested a lot, so it's been moved to grade 8.
Our current grade 5 was tested last year, science kneecap, right? So they're a great little experiment. They're going to get a double dose of science testing.
That's right. It's a different test now, however, because there's not an inquiry component to it. Before, the kids actually did it either in an experiment or a data analysis in a group. And this year it's completely on the computer. So it will be a different test. However, they will be simulating experiments. So it's going to be, but that's not going to, the results will not count the first year for us. It will be a way for us to learn what the test is like. So we'll get a little bit of a break with that. All right, so very briefly go over these. I think you can see I've color-coded them so that it's helpful for you. So we have a park 3-year trend. And once again, as I said, just this disclaimer, just to be transparent, the all and the high is really not 3 years for comparison. But you'll see some of the gains that we have. Some of our schools have really had outstanding years with increased jumps in their scores. And then the disaggregated data for subgroups, I actually gave you a column with the differences. So you can see the differences in gender, for example. NK has a 17% gap between the boys and girls. The state had a 14% gap. Interestingly enough, that was not the case with the SAT. So whatever that's worth. In places where there's just a dash, there was insufficient data. That means there were less than 10 data points to be reported out. So you can see on the IEP, the difference on the right side there, you're at basically 34, 35%, 30%. If you look at the SES, this is different for us. The SES for ELA is up at a difference of 46%. We've never had that disparity in our SES before. SES is a social economic status, so that's reflecting our poverty. Could be reflecting an increase in poverty in the district. I'm not exactly sure. We'll have to see if that continues. And then finally, the last one is a cohort data trend. So you can follow along. I did it by colors. So if you look, for example, at ELA in grade 3 in 2015, we had 59% proficiency. It is that same group of students who obviously became 4th graders the following year. If you go down at an angle and follow the red, you'll see that they were then 57%, and then as 5th graders, they were 64%. So that is the same group of students, the same, we call it a cohort, that's the same group of students. You can see their progress from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade. If you look at 4th grade for ELA, you can see they started at 56, they went to 61, and then dropped a little bit to 58. So, and then grade 5 is a nice one to look at, because they started off 2 years ago at 64%, went to 65%, and then went up to 76% as 7th graders, as that 7th grade keeps impressing us. And we also have, if you look at, on the math side of it, if you look at grade 5, in 2015, we were at 45%. That cohort then went up to 52%, and then went up to 54%. So that is the same group of kids. So you can see the growth. That's basically what this is demonstrating. Are there any questions?
I think, Dr. Howard, one other point is we're a computer-based testing district. I think one thing the state also fails to do, from a transparency perspective, is there are still a few districts that do paper, and there's clearly a upward bias on the paper takers. One only needs to look at our 2 local charter schools, one that switched from paper to computer this year and saw a 30% drop in proficiency in their 3rd graders, first time using the computers, or the other school still, is, for some unknown reason, gets a waiver from the state to do paper and shows very high proficiencies.
And so
I think the state should make it very clear who are computer-based districts and who are paper-based districts. And it's a little disingenuous to tout them as the same results when there's clearly a learning curve for taking the test on the computer.
It's my understanding that people who wanted to use a paper-based test this year had to apply for a waiver to do that. The test was meant to be administered on
Yes,
computer.
and I think RIDE should make clear those schools that got a waiver, and hopefully under RIDEcast we can do a better apples to apples, because I don't think RIDE should be including the paper-based test scores in comparing to computer-based scores.
And
It's
so
not apples to apples.
the year before the PARCC test started counting, when we were actually sort of piloting as a state, and we were doing it only in certain grades, we strategically made the decision that even though we didn't have one-to-one devices at that time, that we would use what devices we had, stretch them out amongst the kids in different periods during the day and different days, to be sure that the kids got used to using the platforms that were given electronically. That was, I think, very important. They got used to it because there are some certain components that are tricky. And so the kids, we wanted them to go through that when the test didn't count for us as state results. So at least it put us, I think it positioned us a little bit better for our baseline when we did do it the following year for real.
Thank you very much. So, next are citizens' comments. I don't know if anyone signed up. See anyone jumping? So, oh, someone did? Two, okay.
What's your name?
Right.
Thank you. Mark Tuareg, hi. If you could come up to the microphone.
Sure.
And if you could state your name and address, and if you could please keep your comments under 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it. And thank you.
Mike Tuareg, 130 Orchard Woods Drive. I have an upcoming 3rd grader in Hamilton, so I had to look at the PARCC 2017 sample test as well as the PARCC 2015 full math test that I guess Peterson released the test in its entirety, just to see what's on this test. I have a hard time with some of these questions. There's a question on here, which 3 statements can be represented by the expression 24 divided by 4? There's 5 statements there, and I just feel that in 3rd grade, for 3rd graders to have to read numbers and words all over the place, and especially if a child has trouble reading still at this point when they take part. I'm not sure if this question really measures reading ability or math. The other type of question I saw in Park that I had a problem with, and I hope Lycast fixes this. Cindy is finding the quotient of 27 divided by 9. She says the answer is 18 because addition is the opposite of division, and 9 plus 18 is 27. Identify the incorrect reasoning in Cindy's statement. So the question asks a third grader to analyze a wrong statement. So this book here is called Microelectronic Circuits, better known as Cedra Smith by every electrical engineering department in North America. This is the book that most colleges use. There's 1,370 problems in here. There are 450 solved problems on here, and not one of them asks the student to analyze a wrong answer and then explain why it's wrong and then to just do it. So my point is that nobody does this, so I question some of the value of this test by looking at some of these questions, and I just hope we take that into account when we look at all this data, actually look at these sample tests. This one even here, we talked about how cumbersome the test is. This is a screenshot. It's got some kind of buttons on the side where the students have to enter in an equation or something, and I didn't try it myself. But it looks tricky. There's another one with a pie chart, and the students are supposed to click on they're supposed to mash an arrow button or something to try to get the pie to have enough dimensions in it or something. So, I just question sometimes, are we testing their ability to take this test, and are we really measuring proficiency on this? So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for coming. Anyone else who may not have signed up would still like to speak? You're welcome to. Next, Superintendent's report, Dr. Zhang.
Just a few quick items. We do these things happen about a week or so ago now, but we got a very good opening of school. I want to commend Katie Barrington in the Office of Family Learning. We had a really good night for the kindergarten kickoff. It was a beautiful night out at the football field, and we had over 100 of our kindergarten kids. It was a sea of white T-shirts out there. It was really nice to see. That was a great way to start the year. Also, since we last met, we have determined that Sandra Mikelski of Davidson Middle School is our North Kingstown Teacher of the Year, and Carol Taylor of North Kingstown High School is the Educational Support Person of the Year. I can talk about Sandra. She is the quintessential lifelong learner. She goes all around the world to tour and to learn, and she brings that back to DMS. I've been in the room when she's had representatives from the Japanese consulate with their kids, learning all kinds of different cultures. She's a real inspiration as a teacher. And Carol Taylor works in the front office at the high school and has been there for quite a while. And you won't find a more dedicated person anywhere. And she's someone that the high school depends on a great deal, and she's always there with a very friendly face and doing about 10 jobs at once every day in the front office. She's terrific as well. I want to commend Dr. Humbert and Kim Ramos and Mike Waterman, Tech Director, for a great day. Our first professional day was a technology summit. It's the third one that we've had in North Kingstown. We invite teachers from Jamestown. We also invite teachers from Block Island. We have a connection there as well. And some of them partake in that. And it was just a tremendous day, very well coordinated, and our staff, teachers, and support staff really felt like they got a lot out of it. So that was the beginning of the year.
Thank you very much. Next are routine items. First, if I could have a motion to seal the executive session minutes of this evening, September 12th, 2017. Motion, Ms. Hoskins, Ms. McGovern, second. All of those in favor? Aye. And I can disclose that no votes were taken in our executive session this evening. Next, we have our consent agenda. I'm going to start by exempting item D2. Do any other members have any items they would like to exempt from the consent agenda? Okay, then I would ask for a motion to approve the non-exempted consent agenda items. Second. Motion, Ms. Stevens. Second, Mr. Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. With respect to D2, we had one person need to make a change on the agenda, so I'm going to make a motion that we approve item D2 with the exception of individual I. If I could have a second for that motion. A second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next is, we already took action on grievance 2. We need to take action on item E, which is NEA NK grievance number 1. Anyone want to make a motion? I will. So then I will make the motion that we uphold the superintendent's action on NEA NK grievance number 1. I have a motion. You have to second. Second by Ms. Stevens. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Reaching unfinished business. Anything with respect to the 2017-2018 school budget?
No.
Anything with respect to CIP, existing bond, or future bond? Next item is a policy. There are some revisions to our existing policy regarding emergencies, first aid medications, and infectious diseases procedures. The full revised policy is in your packet. It's not a new policy, so it doesn't need 2 reads. So I'm going to make a motion to approve that item. We have a motion from Ms. Stevens to approve policy C1, and a second from Mrs. McGovern. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. No new business. In your packet are the fiscal year 18 current year-to-date July financial reports. Any questions on those? If not, we have reached the end of our agenda, and I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion, Ms. Hoskins. Second, Ms. McGovern. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.